announced that there will be a public inquiry. What do you think the terms of that inquiry should be? Because there are so many very, very difficult questions that need to be asked, but also there is an urgency here.
That's right, and there are many questions, there's lots of speculation. So first of all, I think it's absolutely right, there is this independent, judge-led public inquiry. The terms of the inquiry should be set by the judge. The Lord Chief Justice will recommend a judge to the Prime Minister. I hope that's going to happen sort of very shortly, and that judge will set the terms of the inquiry. I think it's very important that the victims, their families, their friends, that they are involved in that they get proper legal representation, they get help with that. I think that's going to be important. But also, it is very important that we draw some very quick conclusions. The inquiry, the final inquiry might take some time, but that's not acceptable in terms of having some quick conclusions, both from the inquiry, but also from the fire investigation report, so we can act on that immediately.
I mean, with the Chilcot inquiry and the child sex abuse inquiries, there is always concern that these things take a long deal of time. What reassurances can you give that this will be dealt with swiftly?
I think an inquiry that the judge, and again, it's for the judge to decide, not politicians or anyone else, but if you look at the Hillsborough inquiry, the Taylor report that was done, within the first 3 months, there was an interim report that led immediately to wholesale changes in our football stadiums across the country to make them safer. So I think that's something to look at. But also, alongside this inquiry, there's already a fire inspection report that's being done. The government has asked for that immediately, because there will be people out there here today that will be needing reassurance. They'll be wondering if they're living in high-rise accommodation themselves, and they need to be reinsured. We've already begun that process, and as soon as we have information from that fire inspection report, which we've wanted and asked for within days, then we can act on that as well, because there are some immediate lessons to be drawn, and we cannot wait.
And when we see in the papers this morning that in America this same brand of cladding has actually been banned, it's not used in Germany, it's deemed flammable, do you think that there could be an argument for the cladding that's used on several other tower blocks across the UK to be removed ASAP?
There could well be, and again, I don't want to add to the speculation. I want to go by the evidence and be driven by that. But the reports today, the ones that you've mentioned, the Times and others, they should all be absolutely thoroughly looked at. And if that is what fire investigators believe is a problem, then we should act, and we should act immediately. We cannot wait. This cannot go on for weeks and months. There needs to be some immediate action. Some of the longer term issues the public inquiry can look at, but the immediate fire safety issues cannot wait.
What do you make of Theresa May's visit down to the site yesterday, of course wanting to speak to those that were involved in trying to bring the fire under control, but she didn't talk to any of the victims, any of the survivors, and an unfavourable comparison being made to Jeremy Corbyn, who comparably ran a very good election campaign and yesterday was very human in his response?
Look, I think it was absolutely right for the Prime Minister to visit, and to visit early on. Her intention was
to speak to victims would have been good, wouldn't it?
Well, I think what you want to do is to speak to the people working on the ground on the recovery operation, the rescue operation, to make sure that they've got everything that they've got, and see how she could help. One of the things she did, for example, as soon as she... Well, I think it was important to help by asking what more can government do. Look, different people show their emotion in different ways. The Prime Minister is a person of action, and she wants to help. And one of the first things she did, as soon as she came back to Westminster, was authorise the release of emergency funding for the local authority to make sure that they got every resource that they need. I'll be visiting myself later this morning, again with the local authority, with the volunteers. I'll be meeting victims, because again, I want to make sure that in terms of the recovery effort, that everything that is required is there and is available, and that together we're doing everything we possibly can.
So just to be clear, you think it is very important when you come down to meet with the victims?
Well, that's because I'm focusing on the recovery effort and especially the housing needs of the victims. We already issued a guarantee yesterday that every single family that needs to be rehoused from Grenfell Tower will be rehoused in the local area. I think that is very important.
And can you keep that guarantee? Because we've also
Absolutely.
heard from Jeremy Corbyn that he thinks that luxury homes in this incredibly affluent borough should be made free and available to those that have been displaced by this fire.
We will keep that guarantee. We're working with the local authority. The local authority agrees as well. I think it is hugely important for local people that, goodness knows, they've gone through so much, and no one can add to that by asking them to move away from their local area. So I want to see them rehoused either in the local borough or a neighbouring borough, but in the local area, and I think that is hugely important.
Okay, Sajid Javid, really good to talk to you. We look forward to
Thank
seeing
you
you
very
down
much.
here later on today.
Thank you.
Well, let's take a look through your Friday morning newspapers. We're joined by the literary critic in the FT and the Standard, Arifa Akbar, and the assistant comment editor at The Telegraph, Asa Bennett. Very good morning to you. Another day of grim reading, quite frankly, in the newspapers, dominated by this one story. And Asa, you've picked to start off with this story in The Telegraph, page 4, 8 failures that left the people of Grenfell Tower at the mercy of the inferno.
Indeed, it's a litany of sort of errors, of failures to follow regulation, sort of missed government reviews, sort of, and it's a real sorry sort of tale in a sense, because, to pick out a few examples, there's sort of ideas of not enough sprinklers, the fire doors.
I mean,
we
basic
understand.
things. Yeah.
Yes, the really basic things. And you always think, if the regulations have been properly followed, this inferno should not have been able to have happened in the first place. And yet, you were talking to Sajid Javid just now, and I almost wonder, what would the government really be doing about this? They've been asked before. They've said they would take action, and yet sort of previous housing ministers, they've promised reviews on fire safety, and apparently seem to have done nothing. And that's really why all the questions are just going to mount.
I think it's absolutely shameful that we've had to wait for we've waited for this to happen, the enormous human cost of this, before we start talking about regulation and possible changes in the law. It's shameful.
And there are questions about the fact that there were people voicing their concerns, and they were considered troublemakers, and that they were told they would be evicted if they pursued, some of the
and
action
they weren't
that they
able to
wanted
legal aid to pursue, sort of take the case, to landlords to court properly to
These are
force
some
the
of the
case.
poorest people in society.
And this is not the first time we've had a high-rise fire. And we'll talk about this as we go on, but this isn't the first time it's happened. It's happened in previous years. There's been inquests that have been dropped, reviews that have been forgotten about.
And the recommendations are all the more similar. Like Lacanau House, 2009, the coroner at the inquest recommended more sprinklers. 2010, Shirley Towers in Southampton, the coroner said more sprinklers and fire safety regulation.
Ongoing concerns that, Britain tends to focus on just the one stairwell, the one staircase, where other countries have more than one. These are all concerns that have been repeated over the years. Why are we standing here now talking about them when look, we've heard that the 17 sadly dead are just the tip of the iceberg potentially. People are talking about hopes that we won't go to triple figures.
And Arifa, that search that you talk about being picked up in the Times this morning, that it's being delayed, that search for the dead.
So the human cost is this, that the agony seems only just to have begun. That painful wait for families to find out if their children, their parents, their grandparents are alive or not. And this story says that the actual search can't begin. It probably won't begin at least until tomorrow or Sunday. It can't even begun. They can't begin to search the inside because the inside structure is so weak, so they're actually having to shore up the structure. They're having to build a structure within this ruined structure so it's safe for firefighters and rescue people to get in there.
Well, we've seen the firefighters this morning with the hoses on again. They were having issues yesterday with fires continuing to burn inside the building, especially as the wind picks up. So a huge challenge, and we know the scale of this is what's such a big problem for them.
The hoses can't reach the higher floors either, so
Well, now they're sending sniffer dogs in, which is something, because bodies can be located through that way. They're suggesting that it's going to take about 3 weeks. Other people have said it may take much longer.
And some have said that they may never find the remains of people that were in there. Asa, let's turn to the son now. A love story amidst all the tragedy.
Absolutely, it's sort of a completely heartbreaking tale of how a fireman was trying to sort of reassure Zainab Dean, who was trapped in the 14th floor flat, and about sort of staying calm, remain in the flat, the sort of usual advice, and then sort of clearly in a sort of unspoken way had to hand the phone over to her brother and say to the brother, tell her that you love her, sort of, and also the final words.
Unbelievable, isn't it? And you can understand why these fire officers were so traumatised, because they want to save lives, don't they?
Yeah.
And they do day in, day out, and it was just so difficult for them to do their job. Arifa, the blocks all over the country were given facelifts. So we're talking this morning about whether this was an aesthetic thing or an environmental thing. Either way, were they necessary to put this cladding on the front of the buildings?
Exactly. I mean, this story worries me so much because it's saying a large proportion of the 4,000 over high-rise blocks in Britain are likely to have been fitted with these materials. I mean, isn't that horrifying? That's absolutely horrifying.
Well, it's also why this public inquiry needs to be swift, not just because of the terrible grief of the families that have lost loved ones, but because of all the other people in limbo wondering if they're safe in their tower block.
And it's going to be a massive endeavour, because of these 4,000 older tower blocks, how many now we have to have councils crawling all over their high-rises, checking those materials, going back to see the manufacturers and companies, and it has to be done really quickly, because we heard how residents here raised concern when the refurb was being done. Nobody listened to them, so now they do need to react very quickly with these aging blocks specifically that have had these materials and use potentially.
Ace, I just want to finish this segment from a story on the Daily Express, a story of heroism. So we've got the love story and the heroism this morning.
Absolutely, sort of the lives saved, thankfully, by Ofsted Inspector Marcio Gomez, who wrapped his wife Andrea, who was 7 months pregnant, and the daughters Laura and Megan, in wet towels and led them through sort of smoke and pitch black rooms out of the building, again someone else as well, Michael Palmer Zaban, who ignored advice from in his flat, saved his girlfriend's 5-year-old daughter. So thankfully for these heroes, they managed to get out alive.
Yeah, absolutely, some tales of heroism and hope and optimism. Okay, we'll have more from Arifa and Asa after this short break. Don't go away.